August 14th, 1961. Historically, this was a week of crisis over Berlin. 6 days later, on August 20th, the president ordered 1,500 U.S. troops down the Autobahn into Berlin. But inside the White House, it was the week of the Blauvelt crisis, known irreverently to the Washington press corps when the crisis went public as John's other wife, the week that documentary evidence surfaced indicating that John Kennedy had been married secretly and unsuccessfully before he had married Jackie in 1953. We were gossiping with the Kennedys and the president's college roommate, Congressman Torbert McDonald of Massachusetts, when Pierre Salinger arrived in the middle of dinner. He asked to see the president privately, and they left the room for about 3 minutes. We didn't know it at the time, but Salinger was telling Kennedy for the first time about the surfacing of his other wife. I first heard of the case 2 days later via a telephone call from James Truitt, a former Time correspondent who was then working as an assistant to Philip L. Graham, publisher of the Washington Post. Truitt's story briefly was that some irate DAR type had walked into the city room of the Post, announcing that she had documentary proof of an earlier Kennedy marriage, that she had offered the story to the Chicago Tribune, which had refused to print it. Her proof, she told the Post, was a privately printed book called The Blauvelt Family Genealogy, published in 1957, U.S. Library of Congress Catalog Card Number 56-10936, and readily available in that library. The guts of her evidence was a paragraph listing a Blauvelt descendant by the name of Juri Malcolm, whose third marriage, it was said, was to John F. Kennedy, son of Joseph P. Kennedy. Truitt told me he thought he could get a photostatic copy of the entry, not from the Library of Congress, but from the DAR library. I tried the Library of Congress only to be told pointedly that the book was out and that the waiting list included 10 members of Congress. Truitt arrived at my office at 6 p.m. with the photostat, and sure enough, on page 884, where the 11th generation of Blauvelts was being treated, in entry number 12,427 lay this nugget: Juri Kerr Malcolm. We have no birth date. She was born Kerr, but took the name of her stepfather. She first married Firmin Deloge IV. They were divorced. Juri then married F. John Burzbach. They were divorced, and she married, third, John F. Kennedy, son of Joseph P. Kennedy, one-time ambassador to England. There were no children of the second or third marriages. It wasn't until August 20th that I got what I believe is the complete story from the president himself, and from other sources that will be obvious from what follows. Salinger said he had received only one query on this subject until Truitt and I called him, a query from an assistant to the right-wing commentator Fulton Lewis. Salinger told us he had learned from other sources that both the Boston Herald and the Chicago Tribune had been given the contents of the Blauvelt book, but neither had made any inquiries of him. A friendly congressman was Salinger's source, and several of his unfriendly congressional colleagues, presumably including those on the Library of Congress waiting list, were reportedly licking their chops in anticipation of a scandal.